the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today, what if you could turn your fears into fuel for success? Well, Coach Dan Gordon, our guest today, is here to show you how. Today, what I want you to do is I want you to stop for a moment and ask yourself, what if? What if I felt limitless? What if my fears could motivate me instead of stopping me? What if I lived every day with unlimited self confidence? Who would I be? You're about to meet a man who turns what ifs into reality. If you don't want your life transformed, then you better stop listening right now because Coach Dan Gordon is here to set your mind on fire. Please welcome to us today Coach Dan Gordon, purveyor of all things badass. Coach Dan, welcome to the show today. How are you doing?
Joshua, I love that introduction. It was awesome. It was almost like, I don't know, I wrote it myself. You did great, man.
Wow, yeah, I try to do my best. Did you write that yourself? I'm not sure, but it maybe did you. But Coach, that it's a fascinating introduction, and it speaks a lot about what you do. Thank you for coming on
Thanks.
the show.
It's great to be here. I love talking to entrepreneurs. I love talking to people who really want to hit life hard
Yeah.
because, far too many people live in the blame game, right? They get up in the morning, they say, my boss is terrible. I don't like the relationship that I'm in. I wish this would change or this would change. And I can't change it because of all these circumstances. And most
Yes.
people live inside of their circumstances. And
Mhm.
the work that I do and the people that I talk to, it's all about being outside circumstances. It's about creating your own reality. And I have done that over and over again for myself and lots of people. You better start talking because clearly I am about to hijack your own podcast.
Well, that is the goal today, Coach Dan, because your approach to coaching, it focuses on mindset, it focuses on transformation to drive action, to
Yeah.
drive results. But before we really get into this, I like talking about stories, Coach Dan. Where did this all
Okay.
begin? Did When you were a child, did you always know you were going to be a coach? What is the story of Coach
No.
Dan Gordon?
Uh, I've never been asked that. People like the origin story of my company, and I have this whole thing about where I lost everything and came back. But the question that you ask is a lot more interesting because
Mhm.
I was not like this as a kid.
Right.
Right?
Okay. Interesting.
It was really rough. I had some bad things that happened, some bad family
Mhm.
things that happened, and I tuned out of life. And for
Right.
a large part of my life, I did very little else than just sit around, watch TV, and eat.
Mhm.
And most people figured I was never going to go anywhere. In fact, my
Right.
mom, who believed in me, still thought that she was going to have to take care of me the rest of her life because there
Right.
was just no signs of life in me. And about
Mhm.
at about 30 years old, things were moving really slow, and I realized, man, if I don't make some changes now, this is going to be me for the rest of my life.
Wow. Yes, of course.
And I
Wow.
took a personal development course,
Hmm.
and I was so angry and unhappy. But
Hmm.
listening to the people in this course, and I thought, if I talk the way that they talk, and if I think
Hmm.
the way that they think, that might be a way out of this misery that I live in.
Okay.
And so I got involved in that organization. I eventually took 2 years to learn how to become a facilitator and ended up
Hmm.
traveling around the country and in Europe, teaching these intensive 3 day seminars. And what I found, I was really good at it. I was good at
Right.
being in the changing people's lives business.
Wow.
And a lot of different things happened in between then and now, but I got away from it, but it always followed me. It just kept knocking at my door. And eventually I just gave in and let it in
Yes.
and said, yes, this is what I'm going to do every day for the rest of my life.
Yes. And it's always really because it starts with self doubt, right? And it's
Yeah.
like when you're thinking like, okay, this is really what I'm meant to do, but you know deep down that it is something that you're meant to do, right? But at the same time,
Right.
we we don't want to shine. You know, it's like we're more afraid of success than we are afraid of failure because
Yeah.
you know we don't want to step into that, and it's terrifying because it's uncomfortable. You have to step out of your comfort zone to get
Hmm.
to that. um, you have a really unique approach to coaching. Many entrepreneurs, they struggle with self-doubt, they struggle with procrastination. How do you help your clients or the people that you coach, the individuals, to overcome these challenges and tap into their full potential? What does Coach Dan Gordon do?
Okay. So I have hired a lot of coaches,
Hmm.
and most of them were terrible, right? As I was coming up in coaching. And
Hmm.
what I realized is that a lot of coaches put a lot of pressure on their
Hmm.
clients to perform, right? They don't,
Right,
coaches tend not to take responsibility for their client's success.
right, right.
And the reason that they don't is because they don't want to recognize that they're shitty at being a coach, right? They have something that they learned at some crazy coaching school and they like just sort of like vomit it out on their clients.
Mhm.
And when the clients get nowhere with it, the coaches are like, well, if you had worked harder. And, to me, that just sounds like hiring a pilot to fly you from
Yes.
LA to New York. He lands in
Uh-huh.
Cleveland, and the pilot
Uh-huh.
says, well, if you had been a better passenger, we would have gotten there. Right. So
Oh,
I
come on.
realized right away I wanted to be a coach that took responsibility for my client's success. Well, how am I going to do that? How can I be sure that my clients are going to be successful? And I knew
Mhm.
that there was one thing. There was
Right.
one thing I could do where I can't guarantee someone's success. Like
Yes.
my dentist can't guarantee I'm not going to have cavities, but
Yes.
he does tell me to brush, right? And so it's the same
Mhm.
thing. I can't guarantee that they're going to have success, but I knew if I did this one thing,
Mhm.
that they would have the best shot at success and they would increase their income exponentially. And this one
Right.
thing is selling.
Of course.
Eh, Entrepreneurs tend to be great at what they do, and they tend to suck at selling what they do. And the reason is obviously they invest all of their time into becoming great at that thing, right?
Yes.
Whatever it is. And so, or because of that,
Because of that.
the right selling, closing people, bringing in new clients, they tend to have a
Mhm.
really hard time with that. And I
Yes.
did too. Like people say, oh, Coach Dan, you're so lucky, you're a natural born salesperson. And I'm
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
far from it. you know
Mhm.
when when I first started selling, I would hyperventilate before the sales meeting. I would hyperventilate after the sales meeting. Sometimes I would hyperventilate during the sales meeting. Right? I'd
Yes.
have to go to the bathroom and have a panic attack. And I said, I can't live like this. Like there's got to be a
Of
better
course.
way to sell what I do.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, the reason I'm having such a hard time is because I'm trying to put on a character. Right? I'm
Yes.
trying to figure out how to close them
Mhm.
and talk about their pain points and talk them into it and sort of out logic them with all of their objections. And I thought,
Mhm.
forget it. I just want to have a conversation with people, right? I'm
Yes.
going to use the
There you go.
personal development skills and
Mhm.
training that
Mhm.
I was taught and developed for myself. And I'm going to employ this in
Mhm.
talking to people about selling and
Wow.
closing people. And what I
Mhm.
realized is that most of the time, Joshua, most of the time, the reason that people don't buy isn't because of the price, isn't because they're not ready, isn't because they can't afford it. It's
Mhm.
because they're frightened.
Yes. Of course. Of course.
Anytime you go to try to sell somebody something, and frankly, anytime you go to buy something, you're frightened.
Mhm.
And what you're frightened of isn't spending money or wasting money.
Mm-hmm.
What you're frightened of is how you'll treat yourself
Okay.
if the thing that you buy isn't valuable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you the
Sense.
half a dozen coaches that I hired that went nowhere. I spent a lot of money. I felt like crap.
Uh-huh.
And worse yet, I didn't blame them. I blamed myself.
Right.
And I felt like I had been taken advantage of. I felt like I had been
Mhm.
conned.
Right.
And it's a terrible feeling.
Right.
And so when you have that bad feeling, it makes you resistant to take
Mm-hmm.
risks.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Mm-hmm.
someone comes along to try to sell you something,
Right.
what you're worried about is is having that feeling again of like, oh, I can't believe I screwed up. I can't believe I got talked
Right.
into something
Exactly.
again.
Exactly.
That's the resistance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when I came to be aware of that, then those are the conversations that I had with my prospects, not about how great my product was or my service or
Yes.
what I could do for them or talk about their pain points. I just talked
Of
about
course.
how frightened they were
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
making a mistake.
And this is like very common. It's a common thread to everyone. It's a common thread to what we feel because we
Mm.
also feel frightened of when someone is selling to us, right? And
Yeah, right.
right, and then I always see it as like when you're selling, the first thing that you really sell is yourself, right? And
Yes.
people feel frightened of, well, it's we need to reword this, but for it's true. Like people feel frightened of strangers. People feel frightened of you,
Yeah.
right? They want to trust you from the get go, but not everyone will be able to trust you to do that. So I feel
Hmm.
like these. Talk to me how you try or you help individuals overcome that being frightened when you're selling to them, and how do you teach people to, you know, sell themselves without frightening people, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and this is a great question because it human beings are rather frightened creatures. Right?
Yes, we
The
are.
reason, right? The reason that human beings have survived on this planet this long is
Hmm.
because we have this very strong uh, mechanism inside of us
Hmm.
that wants us to live.
Yes.
And the way that we live is to be paranoid of death at every corner, right? We're always worried. If you think about
Survivor.
merging, right? Yeah, yeah. Our
Survival.
survival instinct is very
Hmm.
strong, right?
Hmm.
If you think about what it's like to merge onto the highway, if you really thought about all
Hmm.
the things that cross your mind as you're merging onto the highway, you would realize that you were thinking about death
Yeah.
for every
Hmm.
second that you're getting on that highway.
Hmm.
Right? You're looking
Hmm.
around at other cars. Are you going to get hit? Are you going to go into the median? Are you, right? All these things. We are constantly worried about mortal terror.
Right.
Now, when you are engaged in a sales conversation, that survival instinct is spun up both in you, the salesperson, and in the
Hmm.
other person, the prospect. Now, for me, the salesperson, the survival instinct that is spun up is I don't want the other person to not like me. I don't want to pressure
Yes.
them. I don't want to piss them off, but it's all
Yes.
involved
Yes.
in if the other person doesn't like me. And here's the really interesting thing.
Hmm.
It triggers a fear of being cast out, right? Our fear of rejection is a fear
Yes.
that was instilled in us
Uh-huh.
by nature when we lived in communities, in caves, when we were cave
Of
dwellers
course.
millions of years ago. Now,
Yes.
if we were cast out of that community, that was death, right? We couldn't
Yes.
survive on our own. We needed to,
Quite
to
literally.
hunt together, right?
Hmm.
To farm together, to work together, to protect ourselves together. We had to be in community to survive. And
Yes.
that survival instinct, that belief is still inside of us.
So
And
ingrained.
that's why, right? That's why human beings are so afraid of rejection.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're afraid of rejection because it triggers that survival instinct that we need to be in community.
And this is difficult
And
because fear is
yeah,
like, again, like we are always held back by fear, and
hmm,
that's, it's not like you said, we it goes back to caveman days, so it's so ingrained into our DNA, it's so automatic to us. How do you
yeah,
help people overcome this so they could get past that?
great question. It starts with the acknowledgement that I am afraid.
Of course.
Right? And a lot of people don't want to do that. Like going into a sales meeting, some people try to pump themselves up. I'm a badass. No one can, right? But
Mhm.
really, what you want to do is acknowledge I'm feeling a lot of fear. I'm
Yeah.
really scared. And
Mhm.
not try to talk yourself out of it, but just hear it. Because
Mhm.
that fear is like a little child in a thunderstorm.
Right.
And if you take that child in a thunderstorm and shake him and say, there's nothing to be afraid of,
Mhm.
he's only going to get more scared.
Of course.
But if you give him a little hug and say, hey, guy, I know it's really scary, isn't it? Like,
Mhm.
like I wish that thunder would stop.
Uh-huh.
Right. Well, if you do that to yourself, you're going to acknowledge the fact that you're struggling. Like, hey, man, I get it. This is really scary going into the sales conversation.
Right.
And when you acknowledge that, then you can open yourself up and say, but here's what I need to remember. Nothing bad's going to happen in there.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
no
right.
matter what happens, that person buys, that person doesn't, I'm going to be okay. I'm
Mhm.
still going to have
Mhm.
love in my life. I'm going to have food in my belly, going to have a roof over my head. I'm going to be okay.
Wow.
And it's okay if I'm scared in there. Right.
Of course.
So, what I'm saying, Joshua, is you begin to deconstruct
Right.
the building blocks of that fear.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
begin to understand it. And this is what I did. This is how I began to overcome those panic attacks. I would be in the middle of a sales meeting and I would think in the back of my mind, I'm okay. Nothing bad is happening.
Mhm.
Right? I'm just having a conversation. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be done here in a little while and I'm going to be fine. And little by little, I became more and more comfortable.
Uh-huh.
And and those are the places that you have to go because it is an emotional reaction. When you're
Yes.
in a sales conversation and you're feeling afraid, it's an emotional reaction. It's not an intellectual one. And
Uh-huh.
trying to play the game of intellect with your
Uh-huh.
fear
Mhm.
is like a married couple that doesn't talk to each other trying to work things out. Right?
Of course.
Our emotion and our logic
Yes.
is the most um,
Contradicting.
right. Perfectly said. It is the most
Mhm.
contradictory relationship, right? It's
It
two
is. It
people
is.
who don't agree. Right? It's
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
these kids on the college campuses right now screaming at each other
Yes.
about what's
Yes.
going on in the Middle East. No one's listening to each other.
Yes.
Your emotions and your logic don't listen to each other.
All the time,
Right?
and it happens all the time. Everyone has this
Yes.
internal battle where there's like emotions first and logics first. But I love how you said, like, first acknowledge you're going to be fine, no one's going to be hurt,
Mm.
they're just going to talk to people. But it also is like being kind to yourself, right? Being able
Yes.
to come to that point, like, okay, hey, it's fine, you're not gonna you're not, even if you get rejected, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. You're still going to go home, you're going to be fine. And this, your whole life doesn't, it's not hinged on this one singular conversation.
Hmm.
Coach Dan, in your experience with coaching, what are some of the many misconceptions? You talk about the contradiction of emotion and logic about business, or like I mean in us, right? And this always happens in business. It happens internally. How do you address these misconceptions, and how do you address that internal contradiction?
So the misconceptions that we have about business, is that what you mean? Or is it
Yes,
something
so
else?
there's, yes, yeah. So there's a misconception about business and common misconceptions about business, but there's also because we have that internal contradiction, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
how do you address both of things right away? And what are the I guess we should start with what are the most common misconceptions about business, and how often does that contradiction come up?
I think I think the biggest misconception of business is I can think through everything and
Right.
plan for problems.
Huh.
Right? That right there is a problem. Right? In
Yes, exactly.
business, you have to assume everything's going to go wrong, and none of the things that you think are going to go wrong will be those things. I can give you a perfect example. Right?
Please.
Uh, I One of the things that I do is I have a virtual assistant company. I supply virtual assistants for my clients and other people.
Hmm.
And we were doing this really killer website for a client, and they got so pissed off. Like we
Oh,
explained perfectly what the website was going to be and how it was going to go, and they just had another thought in their mind about what it was going to be. And what happened is they began to point out, um, well, they used their logic to point out that they weren't getting what they expected.
there you go.
Right.
There
And
you go.
right.
Mhm.
And as they were pointing these things out, it's not that we lied to them or we said we were going to do something that we didn't do. It's that there were gaps. That
Yes,
like
of
there were
course.
gaps in what they were asking for and what we delivered. We weren't specific enough.
Uh-huh.
So what a lot of business owners will do at that point is they'll go back to the client and go, no, you misunderstand. Like you got it wrong. We were very clear about what like you're just, this is just a big
No,
misunderstanding.
exactly, exactly.
No, right. It is on you as the business owner to
Mhm.
use this as a learning experience.
Yes.
Anytime I have an upset client, the last thing I do in the process is make sure the client is happy. The last thing I do. The first thing I do is identify the system that broke down or the system that was not in place.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So we built a new form for checks and balances about this. Right?
Right.
There are things that the client signed off on this, but we decided the client should sign off on each part of the website individually.
Right. Right.
Right. So we could say, well, like you said, this is what you wanted. Right.
Precisely. Uh-huh.
Now we didn't do that. We just had them sign off on the whole thing. And it was very complicated.
Right.
Right. So, and the other thing that that happened is my exec was quarterbacking this whole thing, right? This is the first thing that
Mhm.
I gave to her, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it blew up. And she came to me and she wanted me to fix it. And I said, no, I want you to handle this. Like, I
Okay.
want you to walk through this. I don't care if we lose the client. What I want you to do is have the experience of working with someone who's really angry because it's
Yes,
going to
of
happen
course.
again.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Right. And so to her credit, because she's badass, right, she stood in the fire and she kept in conversation with this person. And she said, wow, this is really hard because
Yeah.
I don't like people yelling at me.
Of
And
course.
and right. And I said, well, then you have to stop them from yelling. What you have to say is, I want to have a conversation with you,
Yep.
but I'm unwilling to have a conversation if you raise your voice. And if you're
Of
angry
course.
right now, I totally understand. We can have a conversation later. Right.
Yes. Of
And so
course.
like I'm giving her all of these tools that it hadn't occurred to me that she needed to learn. And we set up systems and practices that we didn't realize that we needed.
Right. Right.
So these kind of failures are so important because they guide you and the people who work for you in
Hmm.
new learnings and new ways of being, right? So to come back to the answer to your question about, what are the misconceptions? The misconceptions is that you can figure out how to prevent problems from happening. No, problems happen. And then you figure out what you had done wrong that allowed those problems to happen. It's never the client, it's always you, the business
Right,
owner.
precisely. And there's always something you have to contribute, right? I love that. I love that concept where, like, yeah, okay, something happened. It wasn't totally out of your control. It's nobody's fault, but at the same time, you always have something to contribute to that outcome, right? Because
Yeah.
if you don't come to that point of like, okay, what did I contribute to this? Why am I in this situation, right? If we fail
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge that, we'll never improve. We'll never get better, right? And that is so important when it comes to business. Because so much so when it comes to business and dealing with clients, we're thinking like, my service is badass. So why are you so pissed about it, right? But at the same
Right.
time,
Yeah.
not all the time. Not all the time, right? We never get to that point unless we never get to that badass point until we figure out, why was I so ass about it, right? So
Right.
we can't deal with clients the same way who are also, you know, ask about it too as well. And this is your podcast, by the way. You talk about that. Your podcast is called Badass Entrepreneurs Only. It features
Yep.
conversations with elite business minds. Um, uh, talk to us a little bit about the key insight that you've talked about throughout your, not just with your podcast, but throughout your
Mhm.
experience that you've shared by your guests, by your the people that you've coached. What are the things that have resonated deeply throughout your experience when it comes to sales, when it comes to really, really putting yourself down, like you said, selling authentically? So we're kind of
Yeah.
circling back now. So, what is the best way to really sell yourself authentically?
All right. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to go on a deep dive. Who are
Mhm.
you? What's important to you? And I
Yes.
guarantee you, it's not money, right? You got into business because you had a vision about what you wanted to create in the world.
Hmm.
And bringing that creation into reality
Hmm.
is an act of uh, of self-evaluation,
Hmm.
self-discovery,
Yep.
right? What am I
Yep.
really all about?
Hmm.
And look, I have studied successful people all of my professional career, from Dr. King, Mother Teresa, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, right? And there is a thread that runs through all of these people.
Hmm.
And that is, at one point or another, and sometimes always, they were terrifically disliked. They were hated. And we
Yes.
know some of the people I mentioned were shot. They were assassinated because what they did is they stirred up in other people the parts
Yep.
of themselves that they didn't want to look at. They stirred
Yes.
up in other people the parts of themselves that they don't want to look at.
Yes.
Now, when you go into a sales conversation, that conversation by its nature is going to stir up in you the parts of you that you don't want to look at.
Right.
You're going to stir up the feelings of not being good enough. You're going to stir up the
Yes.
feelings of not being worthy of earning
Yes.
what you're charging.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
All these things are going to get stirred up. And if you don't do that deep dive and say, okay, I'm having some bad feelings, I'm feeling pressure that I'm
Hmm.
creating because of
Hmm.
my own self judgment, my own lack of self acceptance.
Hmm.
Right now, I
Hmm.
want to point at the prospect and say, you're doing this to me. Right? Your stupid questions that you're asking, your stupid resistance, your stupid objections, it's
Hmm.
pissing me off. Right?
Right.
Not true.
Hmm.
You are pissing you off because you refuse to accept the fact that you have flaws.
Wow.
So when you
Gosh.
walk into a sales meeting, you walk in with your flaws in front of you, not
Hmm.
behind you, right? They're not out in the car or
Precisely.
over to the side outside of the
Uh-huh.
Zoom,
Hmm.
camera. They're right in front of you.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
And it's not that you go into a sales meeting and go, look, I got to be honest, I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, it's not what I'm saying at all.
Of course, but it's like about like searching your through authentic self. But before you really put, because before you really put out that sales pitch, you have to know
Yeah.
exactly what it is that you are wanting for yourself, and that's really important
Yes.
because who you are, what your goals are, you can't really fake it, right? Because what I've
No.
experienced, I used to be in insurance sales and different types.
Mm.
Like to me, if I cannot believe the product 100%, I cannot
Yeah.
put it out there. I cannot sell it authentically, and that's sales. This is what we're talking about, is authentic sales,
Mm.
because it's
Hmm.
not always, if you're not authentic, if you do not own yourself, who you are, people feel that fakeness. People feel
Yeah.
that you're just being surface, right? But at the same time, it's also because we are so fearful of our own self value. We are so
Yeah.
fearful of what we
Mm.
might not be enough. And I love that you said that famous people, Martin Luther King and all those people, they stood up, they showed
Yeah.
what is uncomfortable. They put it at the forefront, and that actually frees you, frees you from all these
Yeah.
burden, and allows you to become a better salesperson. Coach Dan, you have achieved remarkable success with your clients and with your coaching, but more than that, you've achieved such a success story in your transformational journey. Share with us some stories and some particularly inspiring or impactful throughout your life, or maybe throughout your clients, where personal development or personal transformation translated into business success. I think that's really, really, really insightful.
It's funny that you say that because we were kind of heading there. And so we'll just continue going there.
Please.
When I talk about being authentic in a sales meeting, it's about connecting with the other person and what they are struggling with. And I'm not talking about bringing out their pain points so you can say how your product or service, overcomes their pain points. What I'm talking about is sharing the struggle that they're having. So there are 4 words that I use in almost every sales conversation
Right.
that brings out the authenticity in me. And so
Right.
and this just sort of happened by accident. I was talking to someone about coaching with me, and look, I'm expensive, okay? And they were really excited about the idea of coaching with me, and you could see the value in it. And I bring out my agreement, and they're just crestfallen. And they look at that and go, I can't afford it. I just can't afford it. And I went, wow, I get it. Like, I know that feeling. I said, my fiance and I love traveling. We love touring the country, and we hate driving. But we don't want to take a train or a bus or have someone else drive us. We want to be in our car.
Yeah.
And luckily, we live in a time and an age where we can now get a car that drives itself. Like, this is the first time in recorded history, in any history, that a vehicle can drive itself. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. Like, this is it. Now we can live our dream. We can travel around and not have the burden of like having to focus on the road, which is exhausting. And so we went to go get a Tesla, and we needed a Model X because we needed a big car to haul our stuff around the country. And I take a look at it, and everything that we want, $114,000, $114,000 for a car.
For a car.
Now, I don't have that kind of money sitting around. I mean, every dollar I make, I invest right back into my company, right? I don't have right? If you looked at my bank account, you'd be like, it doesn't look like you're doing well. It's like, well, I keep money coming in. But the thing is, it's very expensive. And the payments on it would be very expensive. And I turned to Rosalind and I said, well, actually, I was about to say, we can't afford this. And then I stopped myself and I said, I am not living like that. I'm not living in a world that is limited by my belief system.
Right.
And so it was really scary to buy. Look, I'm a Jewish guy from the Midwest, right? We don't buy $114,000. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in this little town, and we were all very, very cognizant of money and respectful of money. And nobody in my family bought a car. I'm not even close, right? And I didn't want to buy it to be all like snooty and everything. It was what it cost to have what we wanted.
Yep.
And so it was really scary, but we bought it.
Right.
And sometimes it still gets scary because that payment comes around, and sometimes my money is in a lot of things, and I don't want to have to pull it out, and but the thing is so I'm sharing this story, and the person's mouth just kind of drops open, and they're like, oh, I thought that you never worried about money. I'm like, no, I'm no different, right? So we had this really beautiful talk about fear of not having enough, and so, it was this beautiful, authentic conversation because I was right there with them, right? Instead of being on the other side of the table, I was on their side.
Right.
And we talked about what it takes to generate income. And I helped them understand how I was going to help them generate income.
Yes.
And then I have a long history of getting people paid back for what they're paying me. And that person took a huge risk. And they signed up. And 2-3 months later, they're making more money. They're making more additional money a month than my coaching costs. So essentially, they're now getting their coaching for free. Wow. And then it started to really rack up, right? And then they're making twice as much as they're paying me, right? So it started to pay off very quickly.
Right.
But it didn't pay off until they took the risk. And they didn't take the risk until they realized that everybody feels that way, even me, especially me.
Right.
because I
Especially.
take more
Yeah.
risks than most people that I know. In fact,
Right.
I've failed more than most people that I know because I've done more new things than most
Mhm.
people that I know. And
Mhm.
it's hard.
Right.
And I'd like to share with you, I'd like to share my secret weapon
Please, please.
because there's a reason that I'm able to overcome a lot of these fears and
Mhm.
struggles.
Mhm.
Now, I tried meditation, I've tried breathing. I've tried all these. I even tried microdosing, right?
Right.
And
That's good.
gummies and things. And I
Mhm.
never liked the way that drugs made me feel.
Right.
And I'm way too hyper to meditate. And
Mhm.
I was turned on to this thing, this product called Nucalm, Nucalm. And what
Okay.
Nucalm
Understood.
is, it's a product that uses this technology called binaural beats. And it's
Right.
essentially music. It is music. And beneath
Yep.
the music
Mhm.
are these sound waves. And the sound waves, our brain
Mhm.
is attracted to the sound waves. Our brain likes patterns. And the
Right.
sound waves alter the way that you think and the way that you
Mhm.
react.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of companies doing. In fact, you can jump onto YouTube and here's this binaural beats. They're all crap.
Mhm.
Newcom spent 30 years developing this technology. It's the only binaural beat company that is a class 3 medical device from the FDA. It's the only
Mhm.
binaural beat company that has patents. It's the only one being used by 56 professional sports teams, by the US
Wow.
Department of Defense, by special forces, by the Navy SEALs, by the Air Force Special Operations, the FBI. All these people who, trust me, have a lot more stress than you and I. So when I heard about this, I said, it sounds like a load of crap, but I'm going to
Yep.
try it.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And
And then you
oh
did.
my God, the
Wow.
first time I used it, 20 minutes, I went on a, a trip, a voyage. My brain went bye bye. And
Okay.
I was just laid out. Now, I use Nucalm at night to get a good night's rest. I use it in the
Right.
morning because I only sleep 5 hours. It makes me feel like I've slept 8 or 10 hours. I
Mhm.
use it during the day when I need to focus. I called up the CEO of this company, a guy named Jim Poole. I said, Jim, I don't know what you've done, but this thing has changed my life. I kind of
Wow.
lied to get to get Jim on the phone, but he's a really cool guy, right?
Uh-huh.
And I said, Jim, look, I interface with a lot of people. I have the ear of a lot of people. I'm on a lot of podcasts. I want to promote Newcom. I said, I need at least a few days or a week of free Newcom to give away. And he said, done. So if you want to try this, and you really should, it's a week free of Newcom on me and on Jim. And all you have
Wow.
to do to
Fantastic.
get it, all you have to do to get this, and you really should, is text the word calm, CALM, to this
Mhm.
number,
Mhm.
213
213
409 8366.
213
213
409.
409 8366 and text the
Mhm.
word calm, CALM. 213 409 8366 and text calm,
Uh-huh.
CALM. One more time, 213 409 8366 and text
And
calm.
text the word
You will get
call.
a link. You will get a link to download New Calm.
Right.
And this isn't part of some sales funnel. This isn't some like, okay, you get Newcom and now you got to buy something. It's just this. You get Newcom for free.
Fantastic.
And I want to tell you something. The
Uh,
second I got into this, the first time that I tried it, I said, this is it. This is the solution. Like
wow.
all these things that I've tried that didn't work, this fixed it. And, when I learned more about it, this has even been used in surgery instead of local anesthesia. Surgery, over
Wow.
2 million surgeries use this instead of anesthesia.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's crazy
That's
how well that it
fascinating.
works. And in fact, they even got what's his name, uh, Tony Robbins.
Tony
Tony
Robbins.
Robbins is now involved with this company. Like, do you realize how many people come to Tony Robbins and want him to be involved with their company? He
Yep.
tried this and he was blown away. And
Wow.
so you gotta try it. I'll just say it one more time. Text calm, CALM, to 213 409-8366. Try Newcom. You will love it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Sharing that secret weapon. I'm already on the site. I'm
Yeah.
already checking it out. I'm already
Right?
right there with you, Coach Dan. Thank you so much for this. I mean, not just this secret weapon, but all the insight that you've shared with us so far,
Yeah.
Coach Dan. Um, I want to show or want to share to the audience and listeners this quote that you said to kind of start putting this together in a ribbon. You said that you have the ability to live your life unlimited.
Yeah.
It's only the stories that you tell yourself that stop you from having the exact life that you want. Coach Dan, before we wrap this up, can you tell us anything else that would allow us? What are the kind of stories that we need to tell to get past that, live our
Mm,
life unlimited, and live our life to the full potential? And anything else that you would like to share us today?
thanks. Yeah. So when my life fell apart about 7 years ago,
Mhm.
um, I realized it was because of the stories I was telling myself. And when I decided to do this work, I
Mhm.
also told myself a story why I can't. And I
Yes.
realized that was it. And so stories like I can't afford it. Now it seems like that's reality. Hey, I'm looking at my bank account, I can't afford it, but I'm living proof that's a story. Right.
Right.
And when you change your thinking, it's not like suddenly a bunch of money shows up in your bank account,
Mhm.
but when you change your thinking, it slowly makes inroads. I'm not ready yet. Right.
Yes.
I'm not smart enough.
Mhm. Mhm.
I right. It's not the right time. These are all stories. And the funny
That's
thing
true.
about the story is that when you're telling yourself a story, it doesn't sound like a story. Like I can't
Yeah.
afford it, doesn't sound like a story. It just sounds like a
Yeah.
plain fact.
Uh,
But all of the people that I mentioned have overcome their stories. And I would write down all the stories that I was telling myself and then write down why it's not true. And I turned
yeah.
that eventually into a book called Jumping the Gap: Kill Your Story and Take Action. And I
Jumping the
want to
gap.
give you guys this book for free. And to get
Please.
that book,
Oh
I'm
wow.
going to give you another text. You just text the word GAP, GAP, to that same number, 213
Okay.
409 8366.
66.
213 409
Eight three
8366
six
and
six.
text the word GAP, GAP. And
Oh.
you're going to be really surprised. You're going to look at that and go, wait, this doesn't sound like a story. It just sounds like a reason. But
Yeah.
our reasons aren't reasons. When Dr. King was in the Oval Office telling Johnson, or Johnson telling King, look, you can't
Mhm.
march. You're going to get someone killed. You're going to get
Yep.
yourself killed.
Yep. Mhm.
And I mean, that's a pretty good story. Like, well, I can't go against the president of the United States,
Yep.
but Dr. King had a vision, and his vision was more important than what the president thought of him, what other people thought of him, or even his life.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
refused to let the story of I can't do this get in the way. And he said, sir, with all due respect, we will march.
Wow.
Just like that. And that's how you overcome your story. You simply make a declaration. I have the money. I will find it. This will not take me down. I am ready.
Yes, you are. Wow. Wow. That's fascinating. I love that story. I love that you gave us that sort of like a turnaround, like putting it all together, wrapping it all around, bringing us full circle. Coach Dan, it has been an insightful session. It has been an insightful. I call it a session because it feels like you're just coaching.
It does feel like a coaching session, doesn't it? It's been
You
fun.
just, yeah, it was really great, very insightful, Coach Dan. And thank you, of course, for the secret weapons once again. 213-409-8366. I have already memorized it. Text call, text gap, text all those words. And ladies and gentlemen, it has been a fantastic session, Coach Dan, and truly is remarkable what you're doing because to me, it resonates with me. Personal development and translating into
Mm.
business development is something that really resonates with me as well. Um, I'd like to give you this opportunity, Coach Dan. Where can we find you? Where can we connect with you? Where are you most active in? Are you on any of these socials? Let us know.
Yeah. It's all the usual stuff. If you do a Google search for Coach Dan Gordon, you will find me everywhere.
Mhm.
We do a shit ton of SEO and it pays off. Trust me.
All right.
And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can go to dangordonenterprise.com. You can find me at my podcast for badass entrepreneurs only. If
Mhm.
you want to get in touch with me, I'm there. Or just text GAP or CALM to 213-409-8366 and say, hey, coach, how's it going? And
All right.
we will talk.
All right. Fantastic. You're very accessible, very approachable to all our audience and listeners out there. Again, remember 213-409-8366. Text CALM and text GAP. Check out Coach Dan Gordon everywhere he is. Make sure grab you know grab all this insight together. And Coach Dan, remember that book. We need to get that book, Jumping That Gap
Yeah.
and Killing Your Stories. Coach Dan, it has been fantastic. It has been amazing. Thank you for coming onto the show, and I look forward to what you continue to do in the future.
Thank you, brother. Be well.
And to all our audience and listeners out there, see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.